Chapter 20 The Amazon. After rubbing his legs and slapping his arms and chest to reassure himself that nothing was broken, Geo stood tall with his hands on his hips and gazed out into the distance. Everything looked and felt just like he had imagined. A forest dense with trees and all manner of giant plant life, with a brownish air so full of moisture you could almost drink it. The noise, too, was everything Geo had expected. Shrill bird calls, cackling monkeys, and a million cicadas competing with countless others to be heard. As soon as he put a foot forwards, however, Geo's textbook Amazon experience was rudely interrupted. His heavy footsteps made a satisfying crunch against crisp snow, instead of a sharp crack against snapping twigs. Geo shielded his eyes as he looked up at the light rushing through the large hole they had made in the ancient canopy. It was almost as if the light was eager to touch the forest floor it had not seen for hundreds of years. It was going to have to wait a while longer, however, as heavy snowflakes casually meandered down the path their fall had made, seemingly in no rush to join their brothers on the forest floor. Some stopped on leaves, as if taking in the sights before the leaves buckled under their weight and sent them down to the next attraction. The snowy glade they had created was indeed everything the Amazon wasn't. The moisture had crashed to the floor, forming an ice hotel for the snowflake tourists to stay and congregate. The snow was so thick it flattened any plant life, making a perfect white bed of snow where only 4 animals dared stand. The rest of the living had long since fled to warmer parts. Standing on the outside looking in, their calls of alarm and anger were now the loudest noises in Geo's textbook Amazon. This sight was utterly lost on Requiem as he stared silently at the back of Vega's chronicle. Freya stood behind Requiem with building annoyance. He hadn't even asked how everyone was. He'd simply strode off and begun looking at the book. A glimmer of hope flickered in Freya's eyes as Requiem looked up, but this was dashed as he stared straight through Geo before returning his gaze to the book. Her anger subsided. There was simply no point in telling Requiem off for not showing concern. She knew he had processed that everyone was fine, and, right now, had more pressing matters on his mind. Requiem turned a little towards the left, but this time, when he looked up, Freya broke the silence. "What are you doing? Don't tell me you broke the compass," she said condescendingly. Requiem was more than happy to rise to the bait, but if Freya was hoping for some eye contact, or even a sign of his distraction, she was going to be disappointed. He looked up from the book, only to stare into the distance and reply loftily, "If you don't want me to tell you, then I shan't." Freya and Duracil stood in silence, waiting for Requiem to get his bearings. In every direction before them was thick forest, with no clear path to be seen. The tangled wood of giant trees, the rough and undulating ground beneath their feet, the ever-mounting snow still intruding through the great canopy above them, it all just looked so daunting. If the compass really was broken, they could search for a lifetime and still not find a gate hidden in the riddle. Tired of waiting, Geo yawned with a mighty stretch, before stopping mid-yawn when his right hand hit something. "I'd rather you didn't strike me, Senor, if it's all the same to you." Freya's heart skipped a beat at the sound of the smooth Spanish accent. She span around to gaze upon the mysterious man they had met in the marble courtyard, standing there as well dressed as ever, holding Geo's great fist just inches from his face. "Hello," Freya said coyly as she walked over. "Senorita, so good to see you," replied the mystery man smoothly with a wide and brilliant smile. "I see you took my advice. I'm glad you felt you could trust me." He walked over to Requiem, who was blatantly ignoring him, still staring and turning, staring and turning. "Can't get your bearings?" the mystery man asked mockingly. Requiem remained stooped over the book as he gave the mystery man a sideways glance. "Isn't that long leather coat a little warm?" Smiling, the mystery man looked up. Not since you froze the sky and caused it to snow in the Amazon." "Oh yes, forgot about that," said Requiem, snapping out of his concentration and looking up at the grey sky, now so thick with snow it was becoming as impenetrable to light as the canopy had been. "I've got to get rid of all that energy anyway." Requiem held his hand to the sky and dispersed the clouds. The large yellow sun reappeared and the snow evaporated in an instant, returning the opening to its dense, humid state. Satisfied that he had put everything back in order, Requiem returned to the book. "I wouldn't bother if I were you," called the mystery man as he walked around the opening. "Once close to the gate, the compass will no longer work. You'll have to find another way." Slapping his hands together and rubbing them vigorously, Geo saw the opportunity to start the second phase of his plan. "Excellent! This is where part 2 of my genius plan comes into effect. Get lost and have Pathfinder show us the way." Without further ado, Geo walked off in a random direction into the dense forest. "Let's go this way. Shouldn't be long till the old bird finds us. Though I wonder how well a penguin will do in this humidity," he called, grinning widely, impressed with his own cunning. The mystery man spoke again. "It is true that a helping hand would be very useful right now, but you can't expect the immortals to always be there. They service all the Akatsuki, not just you." Geo put his hands on his hips and bit his tongue. Just like Requiem, he didn't want to admit that the mystery man was right, but by the same token, he didn't think it wise to ignore him. He walked back to the group, downcast. A brief silence ensued as they dwelt on the mystery man's words. All, that was, except for Requiem, who made everyone jump as he shouted, "Aha! I finally have a new page!" Turning to the group, he read aloud triumphantly, "The forest is the keeper of secrets. Those that have its favour will be shown the way." Geo walked up to Requiem and spoke in hushed tones. "You know, turning the world inside out on itself the other day probably didn't win you any friends here." "Evidently," he sneered, glancing towards the mystery man. Turning to Urasil, Geo shouted, "Urasil, hug some trees. You're stick-thin and draped in green. They're sure to relate to you." "Geo!" shouted Freya in despair. "OK, well maybe they'll like the feminine touch. You go hug them." "Although I'm sure the forest appreciates your caring sentiment, I think this is better," she said, gesturing to the mystery man. The mystery man arched his arm to one side and gently bowed with understated sophistication to show them the way. As he did so, the trees parted, and a smooth, lush green lawn spotted with bright flowers spread out before them. "Wow!" said Freya breathlessly. Turning and beaming back at the mystery man, she added with barely contained adoration, "Thank you. How can we ever repay you?" The mystery man did not get to deliver his smooth reply, as Requiem was quick to speak. "Before we think about that, I'd like to be sure this is something worth repaying. How do we know that this isn't a trap? The first favour could have been free, to lull us into a false sense of security, allowing you to take us anywhere you please on your next visit. I mean, why help us?" The mystery man was not perturbed. Indeed, he seemed to appreciate Requiem's concerns. "Think of it as altruism. I help you now, and in return, one day, perhaps, you can help me." "Say we don't," asked Geo forcibly as he crossed his arms. "Life's full of choices and risks. I've made my choice and am happy with the risk. It is up to you to balance your own books." Walking over to Freya, his long coat wafting in a breeze that no one else could feel, the mystery man took her hand and gently kissed it. "Farewell, senorita. I wish you well," he said wistfully, as he bowed and took off an imaginary hat. All Freya could do was blush. Most people either respected or feared Freya, thanks to her brilliance and fiery temperament. Despite her stunning appearance, few had tried to win her affections, and those brave, or foolhardy enough to try, had been met with fire, some literally. But something about the mystery man was different. and Requiem didn't like it one bit. "Right, this way," called Requiem as he headed for the path, turning his back on the mystery man. Gio agreed with Requiem's unuttered sentiments and did not hesitate to follow. Urasil was torn and repeatedly turned between the path and Freya. I'm sorry for Requiem's rudeness. He is from the South Gate after all," he said weakly. The mystery man smiled. "I am not at all offended." Requiem and Gio had walked quite a way before Freya finally came to her senses. A breathless "thank you" was all she could muster as she skipped towards Urasil. "Think nothing of it. You should go. Your friends will be needing you. One piece of advice before you go." The mystery man held his hand out to stop them, and despite his wearing sunglasses, they could tell he was staring at them intently. It would not do to stray from the path. Freya and Urasil acknowledged his words with a nod and a smile before turning to run after Requiem and Gio. She didn't look back, the mystery man said to himself. Perhaps I'm losing my touch. "Requiem, wait!" Freya called. Requiem and Gio stopped, giving each other a satisfied smile before turning to enjoy the sight of Freya running towards them and dragging Urasil behind her. Gio called to them whilst Requiem continued up the path. "Come on, we haven't got all day, you know. Gates to find, mysteries to solve." Urasil stopped, winded. "Well, you won't get very far without us then, will you?" Freya continued on to Requiem. "And besides, you may need us to hug some trees yet." Requiem turned his head to look at Freya out of the corner of his eye and smiled. "I'll hold you to that." The group walked on, Requiem and Freya leading the way, with Gio and Urasil not far behind. As they followed, Urasil turned to Gio. "Good work back there, by the way. Breaking our fall, I mean. You could easily have got out of the way in time. I'm glad we have someone like you along, and I don't mean because of your size, but more because you do the right thing. I know we can depend on you." The modest Gio coughed to shake off his discomfort at being praised. "Thanks. I thought it was brilliant how you found that book. I really didn't know what to do. That's why I was wrestling with Havoc. I was hoping for inspiration to hit me, but all that hit me was the floor, repeatedly." Looking thoughtful, Gio continued. "How do you think this will pan out? What will we do if we find that people were banished through a fifth gate?" "I'm not sure. I'm less concerned about what you, Freya, or I would do. You know Requiem the best. How do you think he will find it if he finds that mainly Southgate people were banished?" "He'll turn the world on its head," Gio replied in a calm, matter-of-fact fashion. That was the truth, and there was no point in being coy about it. Urasil didn't flinch at Gio's response, and instead pondered their mutual friend. "It must be said, I have been amazed by Requiem's power. He was strong when he first emerged from the South Gate, but now he could rival even the Council. I've never heard of such power developing so quickly." "I know what you mean. The thing that concerns me is what the Council would do if Requiem were to lose his cool. Things could get very messy. Worse still, Akuma could back Requiem." "Don't even think such things," Urasil snapped. "Akuma is far too powerful as it is. He'd probably have trouble taking on the other three councillors, but with Requiem by his side..." "It could change everything," finished Gio. Turning once again to Gio, Urasil asked, "So, why are we doing this?" Looking dead ahead, Gio gave his unflinching reply. "I believe in Requiem. He'll do the right thing in the end. If that means uncovering the truth and shaking the very fabric of our society, then so be it. Better than living a lie." Urasil didn't like what he was hearing, but he knew it was right. "I think the truth, no matter how painful, is the better way," he said hesitantly, before heaving a despairing sigh. "I just hope this doesn't all end in remodelling the four gates in Akuma's image." "That's why we're here," said Gio reassuringly. shaking Ursul with a one-armed hug. As long as Requiem has something worth fighting for, he won't let Akuma destroy it. With my personality, your wisdom, and Freya's love, I'm sure he sees a lot worth protecting. Oh, you've noticed too. It's a shame Requiem appears to be blind to it. Freya's love, I mean, not our attributes, sterling though they are. I think he sees it. He just can't bring himself to believe it right now. A few more kisses from that mystery fella should speed things along. Yes, I just hope our mysterious friend knows what he's letting himself in for. A sudden snap of a twig made Gyo stop and look back. Tapping Ursul on the shoulder, he asked, "Are they supposed to do that?" Who do what? Asked a perplexed Ursul as he turned around. Behind them, the path had sealed closed. The grass and flowers had gone, replaced by the dense forest. "Let's edge back," whispered Ursul. "Carefully now." As they walked backwards gingerly, the grass died and the trees seemed to walk on their roots to close the path. "I don't think I'll be hugging them any time soon," said Ursul with a note of fear. "But I think, as long as we keep pressing forwards, we should be all right." "OK, but no running ahead and getting them to close in on me. We stick together." "Sounds good to me." With their pact agreed, Gyo and Ursul turned and carried on following Freya and Requiem, albeit a little closer this time, and looking casually behind them every now and again to make sure the trees weren't catching up.